The gunshot echoed across the sun-baked plains of Wyoming Territory as Thaddeus Xerxes lowered his smoking revolver, his weathered face revealing nothing of the turmoil within. The year was 1876, and at 34 years of age, the former Confederate soldier had witnessed more death than most men see in several lifetimes. As the outlaw slumped to the ground before him, Thaddeus holstered his weapon with practiced ease, collected the bounty notice from his saddlebag, and headed toward the sheriff's office in Redemption Springs without a backward glance. "That's the third one this month, Xerxes," Sheriff Miller remarked as he counted out the bounty money. "You're making quite a name for yourself." Thaddeus pocketed the cash without expression, just doing what needs doing. "A man ought to take pride in his work," the sheriff continued, studying Thaddeus's impassive face. "But I reckon you're just going through the motions these days." "Got nothing else left to give," Thaddeus replied flatly. "Just this." He tapped the worn Colt at his hip. The sheriff shook his head. "There's more to life than hunting men, son. Not for me. Not anymore." With those words, Thaddeus turned and walked out into the dusty street. The mid-August sun beat down mercilessly as Thaddeus made his way to the Red Creek Saloon. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and piano music. He claimed his usual corner table back to the wall, facing the door. Whiskey was his only companion these days, and he nursed it quietly, lost in memories he couldn't outrun. 7 years had passed since he'd buried his wife and infant son, victims of a typhoid outbreak that had swept through their small Texas homestead. He'd abandoned their dream and drifted north, taking odd jobs until he discovered his talent for tracking outlaws. The dead couldn't haunt him if he kept moving. The saloon doors swung open, momentarily filling the dim interior with harsh sunlight. Thaddeus's hand instinctively moved toward his gun, then relaxed as a woman stepped inside. Her appearance caused an immediate stir among the patrons. She was clearly not one of the painted ladies who typically frequented such establishments. She scanned the room with purpose, her emerald eyes finally settling on Thaddeus. With determined strides, she approached his table. "Mr. Xerxes, Thaddeus Xerxes." Her voice was cultured with an Eastern accent. Thaddeus regarded her warily. "Depends who's asking. My name is Olivia Blackburn. I've been told you're the best tracker in the territory." She remained standing, her posture straight as a ramrod. "I need to hire you." Thaddeus took a slow sip of whiskey. "Not interested. You haven't heard what I'm offering. Don't matter. I hunt outlaws, not whatever you're looking for." Olivia Blackburn pulled out the chair across from him and sat down uninvited. Thaddeus noticed she wore a practical riding dress, dusty from travel. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple bun, a few strands escaping to frame a face that showed both determination and exhaustion. "My brother has been kidnapped," she said, lowering her voice. "By a man named Jacob Slate and his gang. They've demanded a ransom I cannot possibly pay." Thaddeus's expression remained unchanged. "That's a matter for the law." "I've been to the law. Sheriff Miller suggested I find you." She leaned forward. "Please, Mr. Xerxes." "Robert is all the family I have left. I'm no rescuer, madam. I'm a bounty hunter." "There's a $500 reward for Slate," she countered. "Dead or alive, I checked the notices." This caught his attention. Jacob Slate was notorious throughout the territory, a ruthless outlaw who'd eluded capture for years. "Why's your brother worth taking?" Thaddeus asked, finally giving her his full attention. "We recently inherited our father's banking interests. Robert came west to inspect some investments, and I—" She faltered briefly. "I insisted on accompanying him. I wanted adventure. Now I fear my foolishness may cost him his life. How long's he been missing?" 3 days. They sent a ransom note demanding $20,000 by week's end or they'll kill him." Her composure cracked slightly. "I have perhaps a tenth of that sum available." Thaddeus finished his whiskey, considering her words. The woman was clearly desperate, but that wasn't his concern. Slate, however, had a substantial price on his head. "I'll track Slate," he finally said. "Can't promise your brother will be alive when I find him." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you. When can we leave?" "We." Thaddeus's eyebrows rose slightly. "There's no we in this arrangement. I'm coming with you," she stated firmly. "This isn't negotiable." Lady, where I'm going ain't fit for someone like you. Her eyes flashed with unexpected fire. I'm not some delicate flower, Mr. Xerxes. I can ride as well as any man, and I won't slow you down. It's not about slowing me down, it's about staying alive. My brother's life depends on this. I need to be there. Thaddeus recognized the stubborn set of her jaw and realized arguing would waste valuable time. You do exactly as I say when I say it. First sign of trouble, you stay back. Understood, she nodded firmly. When do we leave? Dawn, meet me at the livery stable. Bring only what you can carry on horseback. He stood, towering over her. And Miss Blackburn, if you get yourself killed, it's not on my conscience. I wouldn't dream of inconveniencing you with my death, Mr. Xerxes. Her tone was so dry it almost made him smile. Almost. As promised, Olivia arrived at the livery stable before dawn, dressed in men's trousers and a riding jacket, her hair braided down her back. She had a small pack and a rifle that looked barely used. Thaddeus was already there, checking the saddle on his black gelding, Thunder. You know how to use that, he nodded toward her rifle. My father insisted his children learn to shoot. She demonstrated by checking the chamber with practiced ease. I'm a fair shot, though I prefer not to advertise the fact. Thaddeus grunted noncommittally and turned to the stable owner. The lady needs a horse, something steady but with endurance. They were on the trail within the hour. Thaddeus had examined the ransom note and recognized clues in the wording that suggested Slate's gang was likely holed up in the Badlands to the northwest. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher, Thaddeus setting a pace that tested Olivia's claim about her riding abilities. To his grudging admiration, she kept up without complaint. By midday, they reached a small creek where Thaddeus called a brief halt to water the horses. Olivia dismounted gracefully, stretched her legs, then approached him as he studied the terrain ahead. You think they've harmed him? She asked quietly. Thaddeus considered sugarcoating his response but decided against it. Slate needs your brother alive for ransom. But he's not known for gentle handling, she nodded, her face paling slightly. How much farther to their camp? 2 days, maybe 3, depending on the trail. He squinted at the horizon. I know these lands. Slate favors the Blackstone Ridge area, plenty of caves, good lookout points. You seem familiar with his methods. Been chasing him for 2 years now, come close twice. His jaw tightened. Won't miss a third time. What made you choose this life, Mr. Xerxes? The question caught him off guard. Didn't choose it, just happened. Nothing just happens, she persisted. We all make choices. Some choices get made for us. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. They resumed their journey, the landscape gradually shifting from rolling plains to rockier terrain. By nightfall, they reached the edge of what locals called the Devil's Playground, a maze of sandstone formations and narrow ravines. We'll camp here, Thaddeus announced, dismounting in a small, sheltered hollow. Too dangerous to navigate that in the dark. Olivia slid from her horse, wincing slightly. Despite her earlier bravado, Thaddeus noted the stiffness in her movements after the long day's ride. I'll take first watch, he said, unloading his gear. Get some rest. To her credit, Olivia set about making their sparse camp without complaint. She gathered wood for a small fire while Thaddeus tended to the horses. When he returned, she had a pot of coffee brewing over the flames. Didn't take you for the camping type, he remarked. Boston ladies are full of surprises, she replied with a hint of humor. Though I admit my camping experience is limited to a few carefully supervised expeditions with my father in the Berkshires. Thaddeus accepted the tin cup of coffee she offered. The warmth of the fire softened the harsh lines of his face, revealing, if only momentarily, the man he might have been in another life. Tell me about your brother, he said, surprising himself with the question. Olivia's expression brightened at the mention of Robert. He's brilliant with numbers but terrible with people, completely unsuited for the banking business our father built, but too dutiful to refuse the responsibility. Her fond smile faded. I should have insisted he stay in Boston. He only came west because I was so determined to see the frontier. Self-blame won't help find him. Is that what you tell yourself? She asked quietly. Thaddeus stiffened. Get some sleep. We leave at first light. He moved away from the fire, taking up position on a nearby rock outcropping. From there, he could survey their surroundings while avoiding further conversation. The woman asked too many questions, saw too much. It made him uneasy. Later, when Olivia had fallen into a fitful sleep, Thaddeus allowed himself to study her. In repose, the determined set of her jaw softened, and he was struck by how young she appeared, perhaps 25 at most. Too young and too refined to be trailing after a man like him into outlaw territory. Yet there was steel beneath her polished exterior. He'd seen it in her eyes. At dawn, they broke camp in efficient silence. The terrain grew increasingly challenging as they ventured deeper into the Badlands. Thaddeus led them through narrow passes and across treacherous scree slopes, always alert for signs of Slate's gang. By midday, he spotted what he'd been looking for: fresh horse droppings and cigarette butts along a seldom-used trail. He dismounted to examine the tracks more closely. 2 riders, he murmured, headed northeast, probably scouts. Are we close? Olivia asked, her voice hushed. Getting there. He remounted. From here on, we travel quiet, no talking unless necessary. They followed the trail until it disappeared among the rocks. Thaddeus wasn't deterred, he'd anticipated this. Slate was cunning but predictable in certain ways. His hideouts always offered multiple escape routes and clear sightlines. As the afternoon waned, Thaddeus led them up a steep, winding path to a ridgeline. Once there, he motioned for Olivia to dismount and follow him to a vantage point. Below them, nestled in a hidden valley, stood a collection of crude structures, the remnants of an abandoned mining camp. There, Thaddeus whispered, pointing to the largest building. That's likely where they're keeping your brother. Olivia squinted, counting the figures moving about the camp. I see at least 6 men. How do we get past them? We don't. Not yet. Thaddeus pulled back from the edge. We wait for nightfall. They retreated to a sheltered position where they could observe without being seen. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, Thaddeus outlined his plan. I'll go in alone after midnight. They'll be at their least alert then. And what am I supposed to do? Wait here. Exactly that. If something goes wrong, you take the horses and head straight back to Redemption Springs. Olivia shook her head firmly. I didn't come this far to hide on a ridge. I can help. How? By getting yourself captured or killed? Thaddeus's patience was wearing thin. This isn't a debate. I could create a diversion, she suggested. Draw some of them away while you find Robert. Absolutely not. Mr. Xerxes, I understand the risks, but no, you don't. His voice was low and intense. You've never faced men like Slate. They kill without hesitation and worse. The unspoken implication hung between them. Olivia's face paled, but her determination didn't waver. I'm not asking permission. I'm going to help save my brother. Thaddeus cursed under his breath. He'd encountered stubborn people before, but Olivia Blackburn was in a category all her own. Fine, he conceded grudgingly, but we do this my way. As darkness fell completely, they refined their plan. Thaddeus would infiltrate the camp from the north, while Olivia would position herself to the south, near an old mine entrance. At the agreed signal, 2 owl hoots, she would light and throw a bundle of oil-soaked rags, creating a distraction that would draw the outlaws away from the main building. Once you've thrown it, you hide, Thaddeus instructed firmly. Don't move until I come for you or until dawn, whichever comes first. The hours crawled by as they waited for the camp to quiet. Most of the outlaws eventually retreated into the buildings, leaving only 2 guards patrolling the perimeter. Around midnight, Thaddeus checked his weapons one final time. Stay safe, Olivia whispered as he prepared to leave. He paused, struck by the genuine concern in her voice. You too, he replied awkwardly, unused to such sentiments. Thaddeus moved like a shadow, descending into the valley with silent efficiency. Years of hunting had taught him to blend with the darkness, to move with the natural sounds of the night. He circled the camp, noting the positions of the guards and confirming the layout matched his expectations. When he reached his position, he gave the signal. Moments later, a bright flare erupted on the opposite side of the camp, followed by startled shouts. As planned, the guards and several men from inside the buildings rushed toward the commotion. Thaddeus seized the opportunity, slipping into the main building through a rear window. Inside, the space was divided into several rooms. He moved cautiously, pistol drawn, checking each area. In the third room, he found what he sought: a man bound to a chair, his face bruised but recognizable from the photograph Olivia had shown him. Robert Blackburn looked up, eyes widening in surprise and fear. "I'm with your sister," Thaddeus whispered, quickly cutting the ropes. "Can you walk?" Robert nodded, rubbing his wrists as the bonds fell away. "Olivia's here, unfortunately," Thaddeus muttered. "Let's go before they realize they've been tricked." He helped Robert to his feet, steadying him as the younger man swayed. Outside, the commotion continued, but it wouldn't distract Slate's men for long. They needed to move quickly. Thaddeus led Robert toward the back of the camp, away from the disturbance Olivia had created. They'd nearly reached the edge of the clearing when a voice called out behind them. "Well, well, what have we here?" Thaddeus turned slowly to find Jacob Slate himself standing 20 feet away, revolver aimed steadily at them. The outlaw looked much as Thaddeus remembered from their last encounter, lean and weather-beaten, with cold eyes that missed nothing. "Xerxes," Slate acknowledged with a mirthless smile. "Heard you were still hunting bounties. Didn't expect to see you in my camp, though. Been looking for you a long time, Slate." Thaddeus positioned himself slightly in front of Robert. "Figured I'd collect that reward money." "And I figured you'd have learned your lesson after our last meeting." Slate gestured with his gun. "Drop your weapon." Thaddeus assessed his options. Slate was a quick draw and a deadly shot. Even if he managed to pull his own gun, Robert would likely be caught in the crossfire. Before he could decide, a shot rang out from the darkness. Slate jerked, his gun discharging harmlessly into the ground as he clutched his shoulder. Thaddeus didn't hesitate. He drew and fired in one fluid motion, hitting Slate squarely in the chest. As the outlaw crumpled, Thaddeus whirled toward the source of the first shot. Olivia emerged from the shadows, Robert's rifle in her hands, her face a mask of determination. "I told you to stay hidden," Thaddeus growled. "You're welcome," she replied, rushing to embrace her brother. Their reunion was cut short by shouts from across the camp. The remaining outlaws had realized something was wrong and were converging on their position. "Run," Thaddeus ordered, firing twice more to cover their retreat. They fled into the darkness, scrambling up the rocky slope toward where they'd left the horses. Bullets ricocheted off stones around them. Robert stumbled, weakened by his captivity, but Olivia and Thaddeus half carried him up the treacherous path. When they reached the horses, Thaddeus quickly helped Robert onto Olivia's mount. "You'll have to ride double. He can't manage on his own." "What about Slate?" Olivia asked as she mounted behind her brother. "Dead." Thaddeus swung onto Thunder's back, "but his men won't be far behind." "We need to move." They rode hard through the night, Thaddeus leading them along routes too difficult for their pursuers to follow easily. By dawn, they'd put considerable distance between themselves and Slate's gang, but Thaddeus wasn't satisfied. He pushed on until they reached a small homestead he knew to be abandoned. "We'll rest here briefly," he announced, dismounting. "The horses need water, and so does your brother." Robert's condition had deteriorated during the ride. His face was flushed with fever, and he could barely stay in the saddle. Once inside the dilapidated cabin, Thaddeus helped him to a dusty cot while Olivia searched for water. "Thank you," Robert managed weakly, "for coming after me." "Thank your sister," Thaddeus replied. "She's the one who wouldn't take no for an answer." Olivia returned with a canteen. As she tended to her brother, Thaddeus stepped outside to check for signs of pursuit. The morning light revealed the true extent of Robert's injuries. His face was badly bruised, and there was a worrying wound on his side that had reopened during their escape. "He needs a doctor," Olivia said when Thaddeus returned. "The nearest town, Fort Laramie, 2 days' ride." Thaddeus studied Robert's pallor, but he won't make it that far in his condition. There must be somewhere closer. Thaddeus hesitated, then nodded. "There's a settlement about half a day's ride from here, small place called Promise Creek. They have someone who knows medicine, not a proper doctor, but better than nothing." "Then that's where we're going." Olivia's tone brooked no argument. They allowed the horses 2 hours rest before setting out again. Robert drifted in and out of consciousness as they traveled, his condition clearly worsening. By mid-afternoon, the small settlement of Promise Creek came into view, a cluster of modest buildings along a swift-flowing creek. Thaddeus led them directly to a cabin on the settlement's edge. A hand-painted sign identified it simply as healer. An elderly woman answered their knock, her weathered face creasing with recognition at the sight of Thaddeus. "Twice in 1 year, Xerxes, must be my lucky day. Need your help, Martha," he replied without preamble. "Man's been beaten badly." Possible infection. Martha's gaze shifted to Robert, who was barely conscious between them. "Bring him in." The interior of the cabin was immaculate, with bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters and shelves lined with bottles and jars. Martha directed them to place Robert on a clean bed in the corner. "You two wait outside," she ordered after a quick examination. "I need space to work." Reluctantly, Olivia followed Thaddeus onto the porch. She paced anxiously while he leaned against the railing, watching the settlement's quiet activity. "Will he be all right?" she asked after a long silence. "Martha's the best healer in 3 territories," Thaddeus assured her. "If anyone can help him, she can." Olivia stopped pacing to study him. "How do you know her?" Thaddeus shifted uncomfortably. "Took a bullet last winter, she dug it out. You trust her." "I'm still breathing, aren't I?" Olivia's lips curved in a small smile. "That's not what I meant. You trust her judgment. That's rare for you, I think." Thaddeus didn't respond, uncomfortable with her perception. They waited in uneasy silence until Martha finally emerged, wiping her hands on a cloth. "He'll live," she announced. "Got a nasty infection brewing, but I've cleaned the wound and given him something for the fever. Needs rest now, at least a week." Relief washed over Olivia's face. "Thank you, I can't tell you how grateful I am." Martha waved away her thanks. "You can stay in the back room. There's a spare bed there." "I'll find lodging in town," Thaddeus said quickly. "Nonsense," Martha replied. "Settlement's full with the cattle drive coming through. You can bed down in my storage room. Wouldn't be the first time." Before Thaddeus could object further, Martha ushered Olivia inside to see her brother, effectively ending the discussion. Left alone on the porch, Thaddeus contemplated simply riding out. His job was done, Slate was dead, and the Blackburns were safe. The bounty could be collected when he returned to Redemption Springs. There was no reason to linger, yet something held him there. Perhaps it was the knowledge that Slate's remaining men might still be hunting them. Perhaps it was the unfinished feeling of the whole affair. Or perhaps, though he was reluctant to admit it was the way Olivia Blackburn looked at him, as if she saw something worth seeing. The next morning, Thaddeus awoke at dawn, his back stiff from sleeping on Martha's storage room floor. He slipped out quietly, intending to check on the horses and assess the settlement's security. The early morning air was crisp, promising another hot day ahead. Promise Creek was beginning to stir, with smoke rising from chimneys and merchants preparing to open their shops. It was a peaceful scene, far removed from the violence of the past few days. Thaddeus was examining Thunder's right foreleg when a soft voice interrupted him. Planning to leave without saying goodbye, he turned to find Olivia standing a few feet away, her hair loose around her shoulders, making her look younger than her years. "Horse through a shoe," he replied, straightening up. "Need to get it fixed before heading out. So you are leaving." "Job's done," he shrugged. "Your brother's safe, Slate's dead, no reason to stay." Olivia stepped closer. "Martha says Robert won't be fit to travel for at least a week. I was hoping. That is, I would feel safer if you stayed until then. Slate's men have bigger problems than tracking you down now. Their leader's dead and the law will be after them. Nevertheless, I would sleep better knowing you were nearby." Her gaze was direct, challenging. Thaddeus sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of her jaw. "I'll stay until tomorrow. Then I need to get back to Redemption Springs to collect the bounty." "Thank you." Her relief seemed genuine. "Robert wants to thank you properly when he's more lucid." "No need. I was paid to do a job. Is that all it was to you? Just another job?" There was something in her tone that made him look at her more carefully. Should it be something else? Olivia hesitated. "I thought perhaps—" "Never mind. Will you at least join us for breakfast? Martha's making flapjacks." The invitation was innocent enough, but Thaddeus sensed a deeper current beneath it. Sharing meals created connections, and connections were something he'd deliberately avoided for years. "Need to see about this shoe first," he replied, turning back to Thunder. "Of course, we'll save you a plate." Her voice held no resentment at his obvious evasion, only a quiet understanding that somehow unsettled him more. After she left, Thaddeus led Thunder to the blacksmith's shop. The town's smith, a burly man named Peterson, recognized him immediately. "Xerxes, heard you were in these parts." Peterson examined the horse's hoof. "Simple fix, have it done in an hour." While he waited, Thaddeus found himself wandering the settlement's single street. Promise Creek was the kind of place he typically avoided, small, close-knit, the sort of community where everyone knew everyone else's business. Yet there was something appealing about its simplicity, its ordinary rhythms untouched by the chaos that had defined his existence for so long. Outside the general store, he overheard two men discussing the news of Slate's death. The story had already spread, growing more dramatic with each telling. "Heard Xerxes took down the whole gang single-handed," one said. "Nah, he had help," the other replied. "Some Eastern lady with a rifle. Can you imagine? A proper lady shooting outlaws?" Thaddeus moved on quickly, uncomfortable with the attention. By the time he returned to Martha's cabin, Thunder's shoe was fixed, and he had no excuse to avoid joining the Blackburns. Inside, he found Robert sitting up in bed, looking considerably better than the day before. Olivia sat beside him, and both brightened at Thaddeus's entrance. "Mr. Xerxes," Robert greeted him, "I owe you my life." Thaddeus shrugged off the gratitude, "just doing what I was paid for." "Nevertheless, I insist on doubling your fee," Robert continued. "Once we return to civilization, of course." "That's not necessary." "It is to me." Robert's tone was firm despite his weakened state. A Blackburn always pays his debts. Martha appeared from the kitchen, carrying a plate of flapjacks. "Sit down and eat, Xerxes, you're too thin." Trapped by politeness, Thaddeus took a seat at the small table. The domesticity of the scene was foreign to him, sharing a meal with people who looked at him without fear or suspicion. As they ate, Robert related what had happened during his captivity. Slate's gang had ambushed him while he was inspecting a potential investment property outside Redemption Springs. "They knew exactly who I was and how much I was worth," he explained. "Someone must have tipped them off." "Could be anyone," Thaddeus commented. "Slate had connections everywhere." "Well, thanks to you and my remarkable sister, I'm alive to tell the tale." Robert smiled weakly at Olivia. "Though I think this adventure has cured me of my frontier ambitions. Once I'm well enough to travel, I believe we'll return to Boston." Thaddeus noticed a flicker of something disappointment cross Olivia's face before she composed herself. "Of course," she agreed. "Father's business needs attention, and you require proper medical care." The conversation continued, with Robert asking Thaddeus about his experiences in the West. Despite his inclination toward silence, Thaddeus found himself drawn into the discussion, sharing sanitized versions of his travels through the territories. Throughout the meal, he was acutely aware of Olivia's presence across the table. Her green eyes caught his occasionally, reflecting a warmth and interest that made him inexplicably uneasy. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him that way, as a man rather than a weapon. After breakfast, Thaddeus excused himself to check their back trail. It was a necessary precaution, he told himself, not an escape from the confusing emotions stirring within him. He rode several miles out of town, carefully examining the surrounding countryside for signs of pursuit. Finding none, he should have been relieved. Instead, a strange restlessness possessed him. With no immediate danger to address, his purpose here was effectively complete. Logic dictated he should collect his payment and move on to the next bounty, yet something held him back, a reluctance he couldn't quite name or understand. By the time he returned to Promise Creek, the sun was setting. He found Olivia sitting alone on Martha's porch, her face turned toward the brilliant western sky. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she remarked as he approached. "We don't get sunsets like this in Boston." Thaddeus glanced westward. He'd seen thousands of such sunsets, but had stopped noticing their beauty years ago. "Saw no signs of trouble," he reported, ignoring her comment. "You and your brother should be safe here until he's well enough to travel. So you're leaving?" It wasn't a question, at first light. Olivia nodded, unsurprised. "Martha's preparing supper. Will you at least join us for that before you go?" Before he could decline, Martha herself appeared at the door. "Food's on the table, and I won't have it getting cold. Both of you inside now." Thaddeus found himself once again seated at the small table, this time across from Olivia alone. Martha had taken a tray to Robert, who was resting after a difficult day. He pushed himself too hard, Olivia explained, insisted on trying to walk to the porch and back. Martha gave him something to help him sleep. They ate in silence for a while, the awkwardness between them growing with each passing minute. Finally, Olivia set down her fork and looked directly at him. "I never properly thanked you," she said. "Not just for saving Robert, but for taking me with you. Most men would have refused." "Most men would have been right to refuse," Thaddeus replied. "You took an unnecessary risk." "Perhaps. But I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd waited safely in town while my brother's fate was decided by strangers." "That shot you took," Thaddeus said, recalling the moment she'd saved both him and Robert. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "I told you my father insisted we learn. What I didn't mention was that I practiced every day for years. It was the only activity where I could consistently outperform my cousins, all boys who thought girls shouldn't touch firearms." The image of a younger Olivia defiantly proving her marksmanship made Thaddeus almost smile. "You're full of surprises, Miss Blackburn." "Olivia, please," she corrected gently. "After what we've been through, formality seems rather pointless." Thaddeus nodded, though he didn't offer the same familiarity in return. Using her given name would suggest a closeness he wasn't prepared to acknowledge. After supper, Martha shooed them from her kitchen, insisting she didn't need help with the washing up. They found themselves once again on the porch, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear. "Will you return to bounty hunting?" Olivia asked after a comfortable silence. "It's what I do, but not what you always did." It wasn't a question. Thaddeus stiffened. "What makes you say that?" "Your hands," she replied simply. "You have calluses that don't come from holding a gun or riding a horse. They're a farmer's calluses." He looked down at his hands in the dim light, surprised by her observation. Few people noticed such details. "That was another life," he said finally. "What happened?" Her voice was soft, without pity or judgment, just genuine interest. Perhaps it was the peaceful night, or the strange intimacy of sharing meals and conversation after years of solitude, but Thaddeus found himself answering. "Had a homestead in Texas, wife and son. Typhoid took them both 7 years ago." Olivia was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "That's a terrible loss. World's full of terrible things." "Yes, it is," she agreed, surprising him. "My mother died when I was 8. Consumption. I watched her waste away for months." Her voice remained steady, but he heard the old pain beneath the words. "Father never recovered. He turned to his business, and Robert and I were raised by a succession of governesses." Thaddeus found himself studying her profile in the moonlight. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was a depth to her, a strength that belied her refined upbringing. "What will you do when you return to Boston?" he asked. Olivia sighed. "The expected things. Assist Robert with the business until he marries, then settle into proper spinsterhood, I suppose." "Spinsterhood?" Thaddeus couldn't hide his surprise. "Surely there are plenty of men in Boston who'd what, marry the odd Blackburn girl who prefers rifles to needlepoint?" She laughed without humor. "I had my season, Mr. Xerxes. It was made abundantly clear that my forthright nature and unconventional interests made me unsuitable as a wife." "Sounds like Boston men are fools." The words escaped before he could stop them. Olivia turned to him, her expression unreadable in the darkness. "Perhaps they are," she said quietly, "or perhaps I simply haven't met the right one." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Thaddeus stood abruptly, uncomfortable with the direction of his thoughts. "Dawn comes early," he said stiffly. "Best get some rest." He retreated to Martha's storage room, but sleep eluded him. His mind kept returning to Olivia, her courage in the face of danger, her unwavering determination to save her brother, her unexpected skill with a rifle. And now, the revelation that she was considered unmarriageable in Boston society because she dared to be different. The thought stirred something within him that he'd believed long dead. When morning came, Thaddeus rose before the sun and quietly prepared to leave. He'd written a brief note for the Blackburns, explaining that he would collect the bounty on Slate and forward their share to Boston. It was cleaner this way, he told himself. No awkward goodbyes, no lingering connections. He was saddling thunder when a voice came from behind him. "So you were going to sneak away after all?" He turned to find Olivia standing there, fully dressed despite the early hour, her expression a mixture of hurt and resignation. "Thought it would be easier," he admitted. Easier for whom exactly? Thaddeus had no answer for that. He continued checking Thunder's saddle straps, avoiding her gaze. "I understand," Olivia said after a moment. "You've been alone so long that connections frighten you." "I'm not frightened," he objected sharply. "I'm practical. Your brother will recover, you'll return to Boston, and I'll continue doing what I do. That's the natural order of things." "Is it? Or is it just the path of least resistance?" She stepped closer, her green eyes challenging him. "What if there were other possibilities?" "There aren't." "There could be," she insisted, "if you allowed yourself to consider them." Thaddeus shook his head. "I'm not the man you think I am, Olivia. I've done things. I know exactly what kind of man you are," she interrupted. "I've seen it. Not just when you faced down Slate, but in how you cared for Robert, how you interact with Martha, how you protected me even when you didn't want me along. That doesn't change anything." "It could, if you wanted it to." The raw hope in her voice pierced through defenses he'd maintained for years. Thaddeus looked at her, really looked, and saw not just a beautiful woman but a future he'd thought forever closed to him, and it terrified him. "I have to go," he said, mounting Thunder in a single fluid motion. "Tell your brother I'll send his share of the bounty." Without waiting for her response, he rode out of the stable yard. He didn't look back, couldn't bear to see the disappointment he knew would be written across her face. The journey back to Redemption Springs took 2 days. Throughout the ride, Thaddeus tried to convince himself he'd made the right decision. Olivia Blackburn was from another world, educated, refined, with a future in Boston society despite her protests to the contrary. What could he possibly offer her except a life of hardship and danger? Yet her words haunted him. What if there were other possibilities? When he reached Redemption Springs, Sheriff Miller was pleased to hear of Slate's demise. He processed the bounty payment promptly, commending Thaddeus on finally capturing the notorious outlaw. "Town council's adding a bonus," Miller explained as he counted out the money. "Slate's gang has been terrorizing the territory for too long. They're offering another $500 for any information that helps round up the rest of them." Thaddeus provided what details he could about the gang's hideout and likely movements. With their leader dead, the remaining outlaws would either scatter or regroup under a new leader. Either way, they were weakened. That night, Thaddeus took a room at the hotel rather than his usual place above the saloon. He needed quiet to think, to plan his next move. The logical choice was to head north toward Montana Territory, where several bounties awaited collection. Yet he found himself reluctant to make that commitment. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall as memories of the past week played through his mind. Olivia's determined face as she insisted on accompanying him. The way she'd handled herself during their journey, never complaining despite the hardships. The moment she'd stepped from the shadows, rifle in hand, saving both him and her brother with a single well-placed shot. And finally, her words on that last morning. "I know exactly what kind of man you are." What kind of man was he? For 7 years, he'd defined himself by his grief and his gun. A hunter of men existing on the margins of society, connected to nothing and no one. It had been easier that way, to feel nothing, to expect nothing, to be nothing but the job, until Olivia Blackburn had looked at him and seen something else. Sleep eluded him that night. By dawn, he'd made a decision that surprised even himself. He would return to Promise Creek not to stay, but to properly conclude his business with the Blackburns. It was the professional thing to do, he told himself. Nothing more. The ride back seemed longer than before, each mile giving him ample opportunity to reconsider his choice. Yet he pressed on, arriving in Promise Creek 3 days later, dusty and tired but resolved. Martha's cabin looked exactly as he'd left it, peaceful in the late afternoon sun. As he approached, the door opened and Robert Blackburn emerged, moving slowly but steadily with the aid of a walking stick. "Mr. Xerxes," Robert's surprise was evident. "We didn't expect to see you again." Came to deliver your share of the bounty, Thaddeus explained, dismounting. How are you recovering? Better each day, thanks to Martha's care. Robert studied him with unexpected perception. Though I suspect the money could have been forwarded to Boston, as your note suggested. Thaddeus didn't respond to the implied question. Where's your sister? Down by the creek. She walks there every afternoon. Robert's gaze was knowing. Perhaps you should join her. Uncomfortable with Robert's perception, Thaddeus nevertheless found himself heading toward the creek. He spotted Olivia sitting on a large rock at the water's edge, her back to him, seemingly lost in thought. The setting sun caught in her auburn hair, creating a halo effect that made her appear almost otherworldly. For a moment, he simply watched her, struck by how right she looked in this landscape, not out of place, as he'd initially thought, but somehow perfectly at home. Olivia, he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her expression transforming from surprise to a guarded joy. You came back. Brought your brother's share of the bounty, he explained, approaching the rock where she sat. Of course, she replied, the brief light in her eyes dimming. Thank you for that. Thaddeus stood awkwardly, suddenly unsure what to say. All the carefully rehearsed explanations he'd prepared during the ride seemed inadequate now that she was before him. How is your brother? He asked finally. Much improved. Martha believes he'll be fit to travel within a week. She studied his face. Will you be staying in Promise Creek until then? Hadn't planned that far ahead. Olivia nodded, unsurprised. Well, thank you for bringing the money personally. It was considerate of you. The formality in her tone cut deeper than he'd expected. This wasn't the passionate, forthright woman who'd challenged him days earlier. This was Miss Blackburn of Boston, polite and distant. That's not why I came back, he admitted abruptly, her gaze sharpened. No. Thaddeus removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't know why I came back, or rather I do, but I don't know what good can come of it. Perhaps you should let me be the judge of that, Olivia suggested, her voice softening. Thaddeus sat beside her on the rock, staring at the rushing water. What you said before I left, about knowing what kind of man I am, you're wrong. Am I? Yes, I'm not a good man, Olivia. I've killed people, outlaws who would have killed others, she countered, including my brother and me. Doesn't change the fact that I make my living with a gun. Is that all you are, a gun? She turned to face him fully. Because I've seen more than that. I've seen a man who could have left me behind but didn't, who could have abandoned my brother as a lost cause but risked his life instead. Who treats Martha with respect and kindness despite his gruff exterior. Thaddeus shook his head. You're seeing what you want to see. No, I'm seeing what you refuse to see in yourself. Her hand reached out to touch his arm lightly. There's more to you than your grief, Thaddeus. The use of his given name startled him. Few people called him that anymore. He was simply Xerxes to most. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. Nothing you aren't willing to give, she replied, but I would like you to consider possibilities beyond the life you've been living. What possibilities? You're returning to Boston, Olivia hesitated. Actually, I've been considering staying in the West. This caught him completely by surprise. What about your brother, his business? Robert has competent managers in place. And while he values my assistance, he doesn't truly need it. She looked out over the water. I've never felt at home in Boston the way I have here, even in these difficult circumstances. The West is no place for a woman alone. I wouldn't be alone. Martha has offered me a position as her apprentice. She says I have a natural affinity for healing. Thaddeus stared at her, trying to reconcile this unexpected development with his understanding of her character. It was both shocking and somehow perfectly fitting. You'd give up Boston society to learn frontier medicine from Martha. Boston society has little to offer me, Olivia replied with a wry smile. And Martha has much to teach. It feels right somehow. Thaddeus found himself torn between admiration for her courage and concern for her safety. It won't be easy. Few worthwhile things are. Her gaze met his directly. What about you, Thaddeus? What feels right to you? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. For 7 years, nothing had felt right except the momentary satisfaction of completing a job. Yet here, sitting beside this remarkable woman as the sun set over Promise Creek, he experienced a sense of rightness he'd thought forever lost. I don't know, he answered honestly. Haven't considered anything beyond the next bounty for a long time. Perhaps it's time you did. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. Martha will have supper ready soon. Will you join us? Thaddeus nodded, rising to follow her back to the cabin. As they walked, he found himself studying her profile, wondering at the strange twist of fate that had brought this Eastern lady into his life. The next few days passed in an unexpected rhythm of domesticity. Thaddeus found reasons to delay his departure. Thunder needed rest. The weather looked threatening. There were rumors of outlaws in the area. Each morning, he told himself he would leave the following day. Each evening, he found himself at Martha's table, sharing meals and conversation with Olivia, Robert, and the old healer. To his surprise, he discovered he enjoyed Robert's company. The younger man had a sharp mind and dry wit that emerged more fully as his health improved. Unlike many Easterners Thaddeus had encountered, Robert showed genuine interest in understanding the West, asking thoughtful questions about the territories and their governance. But it was Olivia who continually drew his attention. He watched as she assisted Martha with patience, her natural empathy and quick mind making her an ideal student. She absorbed Martha's lessons eagerly, her hands becoming as skilled at bandaging wounds as they were at firing a rifle. In the evenings, they often found themselves on the porch, talking long after the others had retired. Thaddeus shared stories of his travels through the territories, while Olivia spoke of her life in Boston and her growing certainty that her future lay in the West. "Have you told your brother of your decision?" Thaddeus asked one evening a week after his return. "Yes," Olivia replied. "He was surprised but supportive. Robert understands me better than most. He leaves tomorrow." The stagecoach had been arranged and Robert was well enough to travel. "Yes," she looked out at the darkening landscape. "It will be strange not having him nearby. We've never been separated for more than a few days before. You could still change your mind. Go with him." Olivia shook her head firmly. "My mind is made up. This is where I belong now." Thaddeus found himself both relieved and concerned by her resolution. "Promise Creek is safe enough, but the territories can be dangerous. You should learn to defend yourself beyond just shooting. Are you offering to teach me, Mr. Xerxes?" There was a teasing note in her voice that warmed him unexpectedly. "Might be," he replied, surprised at himself, "if I were staying longer." The unspoken question hung between them. Olivia didn't press, but he saw the hope in her eyes before she looked away. "I would welcome the instruction," she said simply, "for however long you're here." The following morning, they accompanied Robert to the stagecoach stop. The young banker had regained most of his strength, though he still moved with care. As the coach approached, he turned to Thaddeus. "I can never repay what you've done for me," he said, extending his hand. "But please know you have my eternal gratitude and friendship." Thaddeus shook the offered hand, unexpectedly moved by the sincerity in Robert's voice. "Take care of yourself back east." "And you take care of my sister," Robert replied quietly, so only Thaddeus could hear. "She's made her choice and I respect it, but I'd rest easier knowing someone was looking out for her." Before Thaddeus could respond, Robert turned to embrace Olivia. Brother and sister held each other for a long moment, exchanging private words of farewell. When they separated, both had tears in their eyes. "Write to me every week," Robert instructed as he boarded the coach, "and if you need anything at all, you send word immediately." "I will," Olivia promised. "Give my love to Aunt Margaret." They watched as the stagecoach departed, raising dust along the trail as it carried Robert back toward the world he understood. Olivia's hand found Thaddeus's, gripping it tightly as the vehicle disappeared from view. The touch was innocent enough, a moment of shared support during an emotional farewell. Yet Thaddeus felt it like a brand against his skin, a connection he hadn't allowed himself in years. He should pull away, maintain the distance that had protected him for so long. Instead, his fingers curled around hers, returning the pressure, offering comfort and something more that he wasn't ready to name. They walked back to Martha's cabin in silence, still hand in hand. Only when they reached the porch did Olivia release him, her expression thoughtful. "Will you stay?" She asked simply. The question caught him off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. It had been building between them for days. "I'm not sure I can," he answered honestly. "That's not what I asked." Her gaze held his. I asked if you will stay. Thaddeus looked away, unable to meet the intensity in her eyes. I've been moving for 7 years, Olivia. Don't know if I remember how to stop. Perhaps it's time to find out. She stepped closer, her voice soft but determined. I'm not asking for promises, Thaddeus, just time. Time to discover if there's something worth building here. And if there isn't, then we'll know we tried. Her hand touched his arm lightly. Isn't that better than wondering for the rest of our lives? The simple wisdom of her words struck him deeply. For 7 years, he'd existed rather than lived, moving from job to job without allowing himself to form connections. The prospect of stopping, of potentially feeling again both joy and pain, was terrifying. Yet the alternative suddenly seemed worse, riding away from Promise Creek from Olivia without discovering what might be possible between them. I'll stay, he said finally. For a while. The smile that illuminated her face was worth every moment of uncertainty. The while that Thaddeus had committed to gradually extended from days into weeks. He found odd jobs around Promise Creek, repairing roofs, breaking horses for the livery stable, occasionally riding as security for supply wagons. The work wasn't as lucrative as bounty hunting, but it was honest, and it kept him close to Olivia. As promised, he began teaching her self-defense. Their lessons took place in the early mornings before she started her daily studies with Martha. Olivia proved an apt pupil, her natural athleticism and determination compensating for her lack of physical strength. The key is to use your opponent's weight against them, Thaddeus explained during one session, demonstrating a simple escape technique. Most men will expect you to pull away. Instead, you move toward them here, he positioned her hands correctly, then pivot and throw them off balance. Olivia practiced the move repeatedly until she could execute it smoothly. The physical proximity required for these lessons created a crackling awareness between them that grew more difficult to ignore with each passing day. Sometimes their training sessions ended with them standing too close, breathing hard, gazes locked in silent acknowledgement of the attraction neither was ready to act upon. Then one or the other would step away, restoring a safer distance. Meanwhile, Olivia flourished under Martha's tutelage. Her natural empathy and quick mind made her an excellent healer, and the residents of Promise Creek gradually accepted her as Martha's assistant. Thaddeus watched with pride as she gained confidence in her new role, establishing herself as a valued member of the community. In the evenings, they often sat together on Martha's porch, talking long after the old healer had retired. Thaddeus found himself sharing stories he hadn't told anyone about his childhood in Kentucky, his brief time at university before the war, the homestead in Texas where he'd hoped to build a life with Sarah and their son. You still think of them often? Olivia asked one night, her voice gentle in the darkness. Every day, Thaddeus admitted, but differently now. For years, remembering was like reopening a wound. Now, it's more like visiting a grave, still sad but not raw. What changed? He considered the question carefully. Time, maybe. Or perhaps. He hesitated, uncertain how to express what he was feeling. Perhaps what? Olivia prompted. Perhaps finding something worth living for again, he said finally, his voice low. In the dim light of the rising moon, he saw her smile, a soft, private expression that touched something deep within him. As autumn approached, bringing cooler nights and the first hints of color to the aspens in the nearby hills, Thaddeus found himself contemplating a future in Promise Creek. The settlement was growing, with new families arriving regularly. There was talk of building a school, and the general store was expanding to accommodate increased business. He had saved most of his earnings over the past months, initially without clear purpose. Now he found himself eyeing a parcel of land on the settlement's edge, 20 acres with good water access, and a small cabin that needed work, but was structurally sound. The owner, an elderly widower named Johnson, was returning east to live with his daughter. When he approached Thaddeus about buying the property, it felt like more than coincidence. It's good land, Johnson explained as they walked the boundaries. Raised 3 crops of corn and some decent vegetables, plenty of space for horses too. Thaddeus surveyed the property with a critical eye. The cabin needed a new roof and some wall repairs, but the location was ideal, close enough to town for convenience, but with the privacy he valued. "I'll think on it," he told Johnson, unwilling to commit immediately despite his interest. That evening, he mentioned the opportunity to Olivia as they sat on Martha's porch. "Johnson's selling his place," he said casually. "Offered it to me first before listing it publicly." Olivia's hands stilled in her lap. "Are you considering it?" "Might be," he shrugged, attempting nonchalance. "Price is fair, land's good. It would mean staying in Promise Creek," she observed. "Permanently." "That's the complication," he agreed. "Been a long time since I put down roots anywhere." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to?" The simple question cut through his pretense. "Starting to think I might." Her smile was like sunrise. "I think Johnson's land would suit you well." "There's something else I've been considering," Thaddeus continued, emboldened by her response. "Town council's looking for a marshal, asked if I'd be interested." "A marshal?" Olivia's surprise was evident. "That's quite different from bounty hunting. More stable, less traveling." He met her gaze directly. "Means I'd be here in Promise Creek." The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Olivia reached across the space separating them, her hand finding his. "I think you would make an excellent marshal," she said softly, "and I would be very glad to know you were staying." The touch of her hand was warm and sure. Thaddeus found himself turning his palm upward, fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture more intimate than any they had shared before. "Olivia," he began, uncertain how to express what he was feeling. Before he could continue, the cabin door opened and Martha emerged, her expression urgent. "Olivia, we've got an emergency," she announced. "The Miller boy fell from the loft. Looks like a broken leg, maybe worse." Olivia immediately rose, her professional demeanor replacing the personal moment. "I'll get my bag." Thaddeus watched as she transformed from the woman who had been holding his hand to the focused healer. It was yet another facet of her character that he admired, her ability to set aside personal concerns when others needed her. "Need any help?" he offered. "Best come along," Martha replied. "Boy's a big lad for 12. Might need carrying." The night was spent at the Miller farm, with Olivia and Martha working together to set young Tommy's broken leg and monitor him for signs of more serious injury. Thaddeus helped where needed, impressed by Olivia's calm efficiency and gentle bedside manner. By dawn, the crisis had passed. Tommy was sleeping peacefully, his leg splinted and bandaged. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Miller pressed food upon them in gratitude. "Don't know what we'd have done without you both," she told Olivia and Martha. "Doctor's 3 days' ride from here and Tommy was in such pain." "He'll recover fully," Olivia assured her, "but he'll need to stay off that leg for at least 6 weeks. The ride back to Martha's cabin was quiet, all three of them exhausted from the long night. Yet Thaddeus found himself watching Olivia with new eyes, seeing not just the woman he'd grown to care for, but the healer she had become, confident, skilled, and deeply committed to her new community. It was then he realized that his decision had already been made. Perhaps it had been made weeks ago when he'd chosen to stay for a while. Promise Creek was no longer just a place he was passing through, it had become home in a way no place had been since Texas. The following day, after they had both rested, Thaddeus sought out Johnson and agreed to purchase the property. The transaction was completed quickly, with Johnson eager to depart before winter set in. That evening, Thaddeus invited Olivia to walk with him, guiding her toward his new property as the setting sun cast long shadows across the land. "So this is yours now," she remarked as they approached the cabin. "It has good bones." "Needs work," Thaddeus acknowledged. "Roof first, then the north wall. Should be habitable before first snow." They wandered the property as he pointed out his plans where he would expand the corral, which fields would be planted come spring, how the creek could be diverted slightly to better irrigate the western section. As darkness began to fall, they stood before the cabin, surveying the possibilities it represented. Thaddeus found himself uncharacteristically nervous, aware that what he said next would change everything between them. "I spoke with the town council today," he began. "Accepted the marshal position." Olivia's face brightened. "That's wonderful news. There's something else." He took a deep breath. "This place, it's too big for one person. Oh, her voice was carefully neutral, though her eyes betrayed her hope. Been thinking about what you said a while back, about possibilities. He removed his hat, holding it awkwardly before him. Never thought I'd find someone who understood me the way you do, Olivia. Never thought I'd want to build a life with anyone after Sarah. But you. You've shown me there's more left in me than just this. He touched the gun at his hip. Thaddeus, she whispered, her eyes shining in the gathering darkness. I'm not a man of fancy words, he continued, determined to finish what he'd started. But I know what I feel for you is real and true. If you'd consider sharing this place, sharing a life with me, I'd do everything in my power to make you happy. Olivia stepped closer, her hand reaching up to touch his face gently. Are you asking me to marry you, Thaddeus Xerxes? I am, he confirmed, covering her hand with his own. Though I'll understand if you need time to, his words were cut off as Olivia rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but filled with promise, her answer clear before she spoke it aloud. Yes, she said as they separated. Yes, I will marry you. Joy, unlike anything he'd known in 7 years, surged through Thaddeus as he drew her into his arms. Their second kiss was deeper, a sealing of promises and an acknowledgement of the love that had grown between them. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Thaddeus rested his forehead against hers. Never thought I'd find love again, he admitted. You showed me it was still possible. We found each other, Olivia corrected gently, and in doing so found where we both belong. They were married 2 weeks later in Promise Creek's small church, with Martha standing as Olivia's witness and Sheriff Miller as Thaddeus's. Robert sent a telegram conveying his blessing and a generous wedding gift. The cabin was transformed in those intervening weeks, with Thaddeus working from dawn until dusk to replace the roof and repair the walls. Neighbors pitched in, turning the renovations into a community effort. By their wedding day, the place was sturdy and weathertight, with new windows that Olivia had ordered from Denver as her contribution to their home. Their wedding night was a revelation for both of them, a tender, passionate affirmation of the love they had found together. In Olivia's arms, Thaddeus discovered healing he hadn't known he still needed. In his, she found the acceptance and understanding she had always sought. As winter settled over Promise Creek, the newly appointed Marshal Xerxes and his wife established themselves as respected figures in the community. Thaddeus brought order and fairness to his role, while Olivia continued her work with Martha, gaining recognition as a skilled healer in her own right. Their home became a place of warmth and welcome. Olivia planted an herb garden behind the cabin and set up a small treatment room for patients who couldn't make it to Martha's. Thaddeus expanded the corral and acquired 3 quality horses, the beginning of what he hoped would become a successful breeding program alongside their crops. Spring brought new beginnings. As the land awakened from winter's grip, Olivia confirmed what Thaddeus had begun to suspect: they were expecting a child in late summer. The news filled him with both joy and trepidation. Are you happy? Olivia asked as they sat together on their porch, watching the sunset that had become a nightly ritual. Happier than I thought possible, he answered honestly, his hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. But scared too, because of what happened before. She covered his hand with hers. It's natural to be afraid, Thaddeus, but we can't let fear prevent us from embracing this blessing. I know, he agreed, just want to keep you both safe. And you will, Olivia assured him, but some things are beyond our control. All we can do is love each other and this child with our whole hearts for however long we're given. Her wisdom, as always, centered him. Thaddeus pulled her close, marveling at the journey that had brought them together. From the moment she had walked into that saloon in Redemption Springs, Olivia had been challenging his assumptions and expanding his horizons. I love you, he whispered against her hair. More than I can say. I know, she replied, nestling against him, and that's more than enough. As summer approached, Promise Creek continued to grow. A proper schoolhouse was built, and talks began about establishing a bank. Thaddeus found himself increasingly involved in the settlement's governance, his fairness and integrity making him a valued voice on the town council. Olivia's pregnancy progressed well, her body blossoming with new life. Martha pronounced both mother and child healthy, predicting an uncomplicated birth. Still, Thaddeus insisted on having a proper doctor present when the time came, arranging for one from the larger town of Riverton to stay in Promise Creek during Olivia's final month. In August, their daughter was born after a long but ultimately straightforward labor. They named her Sarah Martha Xerxes, honoring both Thaddeus's first wife and the woman who had become like a mother to Olivia. Holding his daughter for the first time, Thaddeus experienced emotions he had thought forever lost to him. The tiny perfection of her features, the soft weight of her in his arms, the overwhelming urge to protect her, all of it washed over him in a wave of love that brought tears to his eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered, carefully returning the infant to Olivia's waiting arms. "Like her mother." "She has your eyes," Olivia observed, smiling tiredly, "and your stubborn chin." "Poor child," Thaddeus joked, his heart so full it ached. "Let's hope she gets your temperament to balance it out." As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, their little family settled into a rhythm of joy and purpose. Thaddeus continued his duties as marshal, finding satisfaction in protecting the community that had become his home. Olivia gradually resumed her healing work, often with little Sarah in a sling across her chest. Their home expanded to accommodate their growing family, with Thaddeus adding a proper bedroom for the baby and enlarging the main living area. The property flourished under their care, with a successful first harvest from their fields and promising developments in their horse breeding endeavors. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Thaddeus surprised Olivia with a gift, a silver locket containing a small family portrait. As he fastened it around her neck, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. "A year ago today, you walked into that saloon in Redemption Springs and changed my life forever," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "I had nothing left to give anyone." "Or so I thought. You had so much to give," Olivia corrected, touching the locket that now rested against her heart. "You just needed someone to remind you." They stood together on their porch, watching the sunset with their daughter sleeping peacefully in Olivia's arms. The future stretched before them, filled with possibilities neither had dared to imagine before finding each other. "Thank you," Thaddeus said simply, his arm around her shoulders. "For what?" "For showing me I still had love to give." He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "And for giving me so much love in return." Olivia smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the last golden rays of sunlight. "Always," she promised, "always." As darkness settled over Promise Creek, the Xerxes family remained on their porch, surrounded by the home they had built together, not just the physical structure, but the life they had created from possibility and hope. For a man who once believed he had nothing left, Thaddeus had found everything that mattered: love, family, purpose, and the courage to begin again. The cowboy who had claimed he had nothing left had found, with Olivia's help, that his heart still held immeasurable capacity for love. And in that discovery lay the greatest bounty of all.